Marines Memorial Association is a 501c19, and your registration, the registration that you pay to be here, helps us sustain these events. And tonight we're very fortunate to have with us not only our board member, but our dear friend Mike Saray moderating tonight for Mr. Thomas Brennan. And you can see in your program that Thomas has got a pretty extensive bio in terms of what he's accomplished as a journalist. So without embarrassing him and going through that list, he is a graduate. First and foremost, he's a graduate of the Marine Corps Combat in Fallujah as a Marine sergeant. So that's first and foremost. And I'd also like to say that he's one of our newest members. So a round of applause for Thomas for jumping on that. And I'd also like to recognize Mike Saray, again, a board member and a special correspondent with the NewsHour, and once again, a list of accomplishments that is long and broad. And Thomas is here tonight because of Mike, and Mike brings us a lot of folks. And Mike is also one of our harshest critics when we don't get the video right or we don't get the program right. We're often reminded, but Mike brings a special patina to these events, and it's wonderful. Mike, thank you again for bringing yet another great speaker. And I'd also like to recognize a few people in the audience. And Diane Paulson, always good to see you. And then and of course Pete Paffrath, one of our board members and another great supporter, and also Lieutenant or Major General. I almost did it. Promoted you, Mike Myatt and his lovely wife Wendy. Thank you so much for being here. I didn't know if you're passing through or whatever, but it's always a pleasure, sir, to see you and Wendy in the place. And before I run off anymore, I just want to say we've got a couple of great events coming up in addition to this one. And I'm going to use my notes. I apologize. These are here because I'm an old colonel and I forget. We have Ambassador for Cybersecurity and Policy. Nate Fick is coming on 7 May for a Leading from the Front. And again, Mike and team are going to be helping us run that event. So we're thrilled to have him come. And right now we've got a large venue planned for that. So pass the word. Go on our website, register, tell your friends, pass the word. Also, we have another young Marine who's done really, really well, Don Fall, who is the president and CEO of CrossFit. And we're doing something a little different. We're doing a live podcast, so that'll be fun. And again, one of our members, Tim Shaw, is going to be moderating that. And what's fun about that is, like, young folks being successful, young veterans being successful is a huge deal here at Marines Memorial, and that's what we celebrate. So having them here is going to be fantastic. And then finally, deep down, another Vietnam veteran, Mr. Bob Parsons, is coming on 13 June. And if anybody knows Mr. Parsons, it's going to be a Meet the Author. He just put out a book, and I'm not going to let on. I'm just going to say go to our website and check out the bio in the book. But he is the founder of GoDaddy and a philanthropist of some note that I'm sure everybody knows. So he'll be coming in for an event. And again, I know shocks you all, Mr. Mike Saray is going to be chatting with him. But if you've seen any of his videos, he's going to be a lot of fun. And Mike's probably going to have to duck and get out of the way. But he's a character, and as most Marines are, and I think he'll be fantastic. A fantastic draw as well. So I think I've overrun my time. General Rocco would be appalled that I've been up here so long, but we haven't done one of these for a bit, and I wanted to recognize everybody. And gentlemen, if you could come up and assume your posts, we can go ahead and get this started. And I think we have Thomas sitting on the left. Yes. We got to get him mic'd up properly. Thank you again so much for coming. Thanks for your continued support. And without further ado, the program for tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Colonel Chris. And please welcome our new member of the Marines Memorial Club, Thomas Brennan. So General Myatt will give you the secret handshake and all the other traditions and rituals that go with being a new member. But welcome to the club and welcome to San Francisco.
Thank you for having me.
Thomas, let's flash back 15 years ago when you were a sergeant in the Marines. Did you ever think you were going to be a journalist?
No, I didn't like journalists. I bought into everything that public affairs has said about keeping your distance and staying in your lane and staying away from journalists as much as possible. So when I showed up to Afghanistan as a sergeant and found a photojournalist embedded on my fob, I wanted to make him disappear very quickly. I thought he was just going to get me in trouble. I didn't think that he would care about us, and he proved me wrong.
And he's pretty tenacious, so he stayed with you all the way through thick and thin. And how did your perceptions of journalism change from that up-close and personal contact with Finbar?
I mean, anytime you're under fire with somebody, it really builds a bond with people, and he stood right next to us. The bullets ricocheted right by his head, just like they ricocheted by our head. He didn't do anything stupid and jeopardize our lives. He listened to us when we told him to do things. But I think the moment that really changed it for me was after I'd gotten wounded, and 3 of my other guys got wounded that day, he brought me my sunglasses that I'd dropped. That was something that he didn't have to do, but like having just had the TBI, like I was really light sensitive, like he could, I mean, it was just a human moment where he helped out our squad. And then coming off of that patrol, I don't remember much other than the fact that like he had me like arm in arm, like kind of guiding me toward the truck. And he put his cameras down. At that point, he was just a fellow human, like trying to get out of a really horrible situation. He took pictures along the way, but he had to get out alive alongside us. And I think that it's hard not to trust somebody and be willing to, it challenges all your misconceptions when he's just as brave as you are. Like I say that Finbar is an honorary Marine, like he's a member of our squad. Like he didn't go through boot camp like us, but like he was in it right alongside us, and yeah, he helped get us out alive.
In 2010, you were hit in Afghanistan. You were a squad leader. Mm-hmm. How did your life change after you were hit?
Immediately, the first thing that happened was like my brain felt foggy. The doctors told me I'd be okay. I'd go back to my guys. Things would seem fine. I immediately, when I went back, couldn't remember how to do a 9-line casualty evac request the right way. Like I was struggling, and that's something that I had like memorized before I got there. I knew all of my guys' ID numbers before I got there, and I was drawing a blank. So I was noticing like issues inside of my head that were persistent and not going away, and that really just ate at me for, I mean, months. You know, like you really hone in on what's changed when it's in your head, and like you're forgetting things, you're angrier than you used to be, you're like having trouble controlling your temper and things. You're acutely aware when you have a brain injury of what has altered, and I think that that's a really tough pill to swallow. So I think that just built up and built up and built up anxiety, it built up anger, it built up resentment toward the Marine Corps. Like, it was my head that was wounded, but it was also like all in my head.
Of all the therapy you went through for this brain injury, what turned out to be one of the more effective things you did to try to get your life back together again?
I was writing. So when I first started therapy, I had aphasia where I not horrible, but I couldn't get the words off my tongue the way that I wanted to say them, or I would like word associate, I'd be thinking apple, but I'd say orange. Like I was making doing weird things like that. And writing allowed me to not have to worry about how I was saying things. Like I could get everything down on paper and fix the mistakes without feeling like I was stupid.
And prior to that, how many times in your life had you sat down and written a journal, really reflecting what you were thinking at the time?
I was into creative writing when I was in high school, but I always thought I was going to be some kind of an engineer or an architect. I mean, I specialized in demolitions when I was in the Marine Corps, so I was good at math. I took all the advanced mathematics classes in high school. And once I got blown up, it's almost like the switch flipped in my brain, where I'm useless with helping our daughter with math homework now, but I can write.
Yeah, maybe a little
No.
more volume, Ramiro, if you can.
I appreciate you letting us know.
Thank you. Yeah.
Is that better? Is that any better?
I'm going to just twist it here a little bit. I'm going to aim it. I'm gonna
You
aim
do
it
the
from
video
up there.
stuff for a living.
Yeah.
So.
So, continuing the conversation, so you were writing in your journal, and what,
Is this
one of
better?
those journal entries made its way to an editor at the New York Times. What happened after that?
So that started out as me writing a letter to Finbar, who was the journalist who was embedded. Thank you for saying something. I can actually hear myself now. So I wrote a thank you letter to him because his photographs that he took while we were in combat were really vital to my therapy and coming home. Like, they filled in the blanks on things that I had, not being flip, had been wiped from my mind. So I wrote the thank you letter, but to this day, I'm horrible with punctuation. I'm no good with grammar. And the idea of sending something I had written as a brand new writer to an award-winning journalist was very intimidating. The only person in writing that I knew was his editor at the New York Times, who'd fact-checked a few things with me while I was in the hospital in Afghanistan. So I fired off the email to him and was like, hey, I wrote this. I want to send this to Finbar, but I'm afraid of looking like a moron. Like, will you please put some commas in this for me so it reads okay, before I sent it? And I got an email back probably, I don't know, like an hour later or something, and said, like, can we please publish this?
Do you know how long some people waited to ever hear back from the New York Times?
Right, right.
Yet alone get anything published, especially on their first article.
Yeah.
So
But like I started at the top and worked my way down quickly.
So at that point, once you were published, when did you kind of make the decision that, hey, this is where I want to go, this is what I want to do, this is what I can do?
I mean, that first piece that I published in the Times, the most remarkable thing that happened after that was I saw the comments section afterward. And I know most people aren't like happy about reading the comments section after they write a piece. But what stood out to me was that it was veterans, civilians, active duty, like no military affiliation, anti-war, like so many demographics of people were represented in that comment section. It was all bringing people together. Like, that's what I took away. I mean, yes, it was cool to see your byline, seeing yourself published in the New York Times. Like, I'm not trying to downplay that at all. But like the comments section was really what secured it for me, that there was something there that people needed, wanted. Like, I didn't understand at the time, but I just knew that was the proof that what I had written was resonating with a broader audience than just people with my experiences. And as a veteran, that's something that I viscerally knew was missing out there.
How did you go the next step to Columbia School of Journalism, one of our better schools, and taking all this experience, which you had, which was tremendous, but now converting it into something that would communicate to a lot of people? How was that experience, and how many other people in your class had any military experience, yet alone combat experience?
So Columbia came as my Finbar, who was my mentor, one day said, you should really try to get out of Eastern North Carolina, you should try to expand yourself a little bit more, and you got this education benefit, maybe, go to journalism school. And the reason I applied to Columbia, it goes back to like math being an issue for me. They're the only journalism school that doesn't require you to take a GRE. So that was the only journalism school that I applied to. So like that was part of the reason. The other part was I joined the Marine Corps because it was the hardest one and I wanted the challenge, and I saw Columbia much in the same way of, they say it's the best school, they say it's the hardest journalism school, like, let's rock and roll. Like, I mean, I got the Berkeley crew not, shaking their head at me from the audience, but like that's the way that I saw it. You Berkeley people are smart enough to pass the GRE, so. Yes.
So at Columbia, now you saw what journalism is really about, how it's shaped, platforms you could use, the science behind it. Did you ever think that, well, maybe that encroaches, I just want to share my experiences, that's going to be good enough? Or did you realize, like everything you did in the Marine Corps, you had to really train for it?
I got tired of telling my own story. I think I started being drawn toward telling other people's stories to show like the diversity of the experience. What was the second part of your question?
Well, about the fact that the formal education now, you had the experiences, you had the life experiences, you had something to say, but how difficult was it for you, like you say, to tell other people's stories where you couldn't lean on your personal experiences that much?
I think I actually leaned, I feel like I lean on my personal experiences more in being a reporter talking to other people than I do actually writing. Okay. Hello? Test. There we go. Sorry.
We really did test.
So yeah,
in J school, you learned the formality of journalism and probably connected with a lot of other students. At that point, when did you think you'd go beyond just being a journalist, but actually creating a news bureau?
it was when so we took a field trip in grad school, and that's where I really got the idea for War Horse. I walked through a newsroom called the Marshall Project. They were a startup at the time, and I think they had like 6 people that were working there. Like the 2 original editors were still on staff. And it was the closest thing to a New York City Marine command post that I could imagine. Like it was, crappy computers on a crappy desk in a not so crappy New York office. But I walked away from that asking myself, could the Marshall Project exist, but to focus on military service, to focus on bridging that military and civilian divide? And for the rest of my time at Columbia, I made everybody mad on the career services team. I didn't apply for a single job. I didn't, my wife was probably not too happy about that either. And I just felt compelled that I had to start this, I had to give it a try. I had to start this newsroom because having been a local reporter outside of Camp Lejeune, I realized the negative way, all the ways that it was negatively impacting veterans and military families not having a prominent voice in that community within the news ecosystem. And I wanted to go to Columbia to really try to figure out how to solve that problem.
So instead of trying to become a reporter, you start your own newsroom. That's a great way to get a job. Get yourself right up to the top.
Well, I mean, there actually was a part of that was kind of selfish. Like when you're a new military reporter and you're looking out across the space, I mean, yes, you have Dana Priest. Yes, you have C.J. Chivers. You've got some of these, the OG military reporters that have these big positions and big paydays and big roles at these newsrooms. That's not something that exists for us to, those positions are dying. Right?
Right.
So part of it was, where can I write features and investigations that I like to write and make sure that I have a job? But also I knew I wasn't alone. There's other reporters just like me that want to cover those same issues that don't have a home for those stories or that impact. And I just saw.
And if I might add, we use, at the News Hour, we use the War Horse quite a bit because they do the heavy lifting investigating that takes months at a time, and to really get into a story that we, doing a daily show, really don't have the time resources to do. So you start a newsroom, and a lot of other newsrooms like mine and others would rely heavily on the War Horse to source stories. And probably is the greatest litmus test at all that other journalism newsrooms were relying on you so heavily.
It's always been a badge of honor for me for really that people trust the work. I mean, the fact that readers trust us and the fact that other journalists trust us, trust is everything in news, and the fact that we've earned it and we're maintaining it, that to me is one of the most proud, I'm most proud of that when it comes to War Horse. It's I have an awesome team, we've raised a good amount of money, but people trust us. And that's going to take us, not just through the challenges that we're facing right now, but I think it's going to lead to success in the long run and sustainability.
What can the War Horse do that Military Times or Leatherneck Magazine or Stars and Stripes or the traditional military reporting services, what can you do that they can't do?
I think it goes back to the time. We are willing to dedicate the time that a story needs, whereas like the model at, and I want to preface this by saying every military reporting newsroom has their like role. They're all important. I'm not disparaging the Military Times or any other one by saying this, but like they focus on breaking news or opinion or commentary. I took a very deliberate approach when I wrote the first business plan with War Horse, which was we're not going to do any of those because we don't want to be redundant. We want to be complementary to other newsrooms. We don't ever want to be competition. What we do is what other newsrooms are not positioned to do. They don't have the funds to be able to do, and it's value add for the entire ecosystem, not like just trying to get us more of a market share, trying to be a more like dominant business. Like part of our success is helping other newsrooms succeed, whether that's Military Times, the NewsHour, you know, Mother John, like we are co-published by other newsrooms. We advise other newsrooms without ever bragging about it. Like I've given sources to, you know, Marine Public Affairs that are looking to tell a story about a certain thing that we just can't, like, I think we're in a position to empower others to share these stories, to amplify these stories, to republish them, like to, yeah.
At first blush, someone would say a news bureau doing investigative reporting on the military is really looking for a lot of flaws in the military and exposing these flaws. The goals of War Horse, is it to take on the military or to make the military more transparent?
I would say a little bit of both. I think you need to take on the military's official narrative in a lot of instances. They have a track record of lying to us. So people need to push back on that. Also, like, I've been the person down, I'm not saying any of the operations that I were in were failed policy, right? But like, our job is to push back on failed policy and to ask the tough questions about the decisions that are made and sending us into harm's way and you know, sending Marines to go do what Marines do and other branches, I guess. But yeah, like I think part of it is to push back. And I think part of it is to force more transparency. I think the American public wants more transparency from the military. I mean, we have $1 trillion a year budget that most people don't understand. The DoD has failed 6 consecutive audits, yet we keep giving them $1 trillion a year. So I think that there's like Americans want and deserve transparency, and Americans also, I hope they want it, but they deserve to have a newsroom that's pushing back on the military's official narrative and really trying to get to the bottom of it. And
Do you think you could have done this after the Vietnam War, or do you think the country had to grow into more freedom of information, independence, and questioning the sources of the information they're getting before they would even listen to an independent source like yours?
I think it's the Vietnam generation that really made the conditions for War Horse to be able to exist today. I mean, whether it's the Vietnam Wall, whether it's speaking out about Agent Orange or Vietnam VA care, or you know, fill in any of the issue areas. Vietnam vets were really the first generation of veterans to speak up about some things not being okay or things needing to improve. And I think that War Horse is one way that like our generation is really trying to take that work that has been done and to continue moving it down the field. So I think it's really your generation that made it so that we could exist today and do the work that we do, and for it to be okay for people to push back on that official narrative and to ask for the truth and demand the truth on behalf of the American public.
The fact that media is so much more open now than it was in our post-Vietnam era generation, is that a barrier that's been dropped? Before, you'd have to try to sell a major newspaper on a story, and if you didn't get it on, it didn't go anywhere. Yeah. You can sidestep the major platforms now and get your message, get your story out. Mm-hmm. Has that added to your ability to reach a larger audience?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think that the internet economy and being able to have a digital-first website has created multiple opportunities for different communities to have much more of a voice and for people to put information out into the public sphere. Yes.
You know, I think it's really interesting. That's the greatest litmus test that you've passed is a lot of the issues that you've brought up, the stories and investigations you've done, have then led to some fairly significant policy changes. So it's not just mowing the Defense Department for fun and games. It really has some changes, and probably one of the more recent ones is the new PACT Act for all the toxins that were generated in the Gulf War, in Iraq War, and whatever, and those veterans suffering from those diseases. You, I think, reported early on, personally you report on the toxicity issues down at Camp Lejeune. Did that give you an idea of what you might be able to do if people were aware of this problem?
So the toxic exposure coverage was my former coworker Kelly Kennedy. My coverage at Camp Lejeune was about more mental health and mental health care. The mental health reporting that I did, so how the story began was I dropped the 2013 NDAA on the floor. And when I picked it up, what I found was that government sequestration was impacting mental health service availability for service members across the United States. So I took that to the local base there. It didn't tell them how I found it in like that 300-page document. And asked them to, how is this going to impact Camp Lejeune? And it was, they told me it was going to be this many dozen mental health workers that didn't, weren't this many dozen mental health workers that weren't going to be available for like emergency care, this for long-term care, for like all these different things. And then I used the like government data to extrapolate that out and show like what it was going to look like across the entire DoD and how many hundreds of hours of emergency mental health care weren't going to be available. And within 4 days, Secretary of Defense Chuck Hagel reversed that furlough on those employees. And that was probably one of the bigger stories of my career, not that story meant the most to me because I know beyond a shadow of a doubt that I saved lives with that one. And that to me like means a lot because I've been that vet in distress who needs that mental health care or needs that access to care. So like that story just meant a lot to me, and it really showed me that local news can have like a transformational national impact.
And I guess carrying forward on the PACT Act, now the medical care that so many Gulf and Iraq and Afghan war veterans are
Kelly's
getting.
Reporting was transformational for toxic exposure healthcare and stuff. I mean, as far as like I would say that her reporting on burn pits and toxic exposure is hands down like one of the most impactful reporting projects that's ever been published in the military space.
And how did you do it differently than the rest of us in that case? I mean, we had reported about the burn pits, and we said it was terrible, and people who were embedded over there knew it was terrible, but it didn't go anywhere really. There was no change, and now.
Well, that was a lot with like, so Kelly broke the story, I think it was like 2005, 2008. I can't remember exactly what year it was, but I mean, she was beating that drum for years. I mean, just this toxic exposure thing, this toxic, and when she joined our team a few years ago, like she just kept beating that drum, and we tried to publish as much reporting to push that down the field like we could. So I think it's just the persistence, right? Like because I mentioned before, we spend $1 trillion on the DoD budget every single year. Less than 5% of all journalism focuses on covering those issues. And this isn't a dig on like NewsHour, but like you have to move on to the next story, right? And it might not cover the military. And that's where I think single subject newsrooms like us really add value, is because we just keep hitting that same coverage over and over and over again. Whether it's like, water access in the Midwest, or me looking at officer misconduct, or whatever the case is.
Since the military is always a reflection of the society from which it comes, the military is dealing with the same issues the civilian world is doing. In the case of sexual exploitation.
Yeah.
Had it not been for an independent source like the War Horse, how much more difficult would it have been for that story to be told to a general audience that was what was happening on bases throughout the military?
So what was written about in Marines United, like I was not the first person to write about that.
Let's refresh people. Marines United was the publishing
Marines United was the sexual exploitation, like the photograph sharing and online sexual exploitation that was happening in the Marine Corps that we exposed back in 2017. Like that. What was the original question?
Well, the question
I'm
really
having a
is-
TBI moment.
You took on sexual exploitation. It's going on in civilian society
Yes.
as well. It was going on in the military, but probably was less reported in the military
Right.
than it was in the civilian world. So now we have this independent source of news, yours being the War Horse. Did that kind of give you the confidence that you really were filling a void for the military?
Yes. But it wasn't like the act of publishing that story didn't really show me that. It was the response to the story that showed me we were filling the void. All the people that were coming to us saying, I've tried to get this story taken elsewhere, I've tried to have other people write about this, like the moment, and all of a sudden, because that story got published, now other newsrooms were paying attention and wanting to talk about it. People were asking about the Army, or they were asking about the Air Force, or asking about wherever. So the story took on a life of its own after I broke that story that showed me the void that we were filling. I was just kind of doing the act initially, but the response to the reporting was what showed me the proof of concept.
One of the, you talked about the criminal justice system in the military. It has its challenges on occasions. You've taken it on before. Do you think you've seen any major changes in the criminal justice system in the military because now there is a little bit more accountability?
So I pay most attention in the Marine Corps, I think. It's the branch I care the most about. And I think the Marine Corps has done a good job in how it's learned and grown after Marines United. I think that there's always room to improve. I mean, and you can look across the military and see that other branches are still continuing to have issues. But it's I think the Marine Corps has done a fairly good job at looking itself in the mirror and recognizing that we do have an issue that needs to be addressed. Yeah, sorry.
Some of the other issues, homelessness. We have some people here from Swords to Plowshares, and one of their veteran workers in the Oakland area was featured in a story with the work he's doing to help out in the East Bay. Again, do you think once that gets broader circulation, it's going to get more attention?
That's the hypothesis. Well, Anne's here. She wrote that story. Anybody can talk to her about that after this. Sorry, not trying to embarrass you. Yes, I think that it'll get more attention with a bigger audience. It's getting shared by other newsrooms have picked it up and things like that. Like the hypothesis is that at scale, when more people understand an issue, more people will either take action, whether that's politically, financially, and philanthropically, like in any way, like people would take action on that thing, but also like that there will be a broader call to action to solve some of those problems. I think that if the majority of Americans understood how terrible some of the military's computers are and how broken some of our gear is and how the readiness issues that we struggle with, what some of the housing issues look like. Like if there was more of a proficiency among the American public about the issues that we deal with as a community, I think there would be more outrage, and I think that there would be more people who were advocating for whether it's better treatment, better pay, better healthcare access, better transition services, whatever it is. And you can look at other social movements that have happened in this country for that proof of concept. When people are aware of an issue, they tend to respond to it and want to see change, or whatever the case is. So that's what I'm banking on. Is right now, we do have a growing and loyal audience, and the trust that they report for us, I would say, is pretty unparalleled at other newsrooms. But we have to grow our audience.
How do you think you're perceived by the military?
So
Is it keep your enemies close, and now we know someone's looking out after the stuff, so we ought to be a little bit more transparent? Or are they more defensive when you call them?
So I get the official responses from the military, and I know they don't like me. But at the same time,
Don't feel alone. They don't like any of us.
no, I know that. Yeah, they don't like any of us.
They're pretty equal opportunity when you call a press officer. Yeah.
But I also get the phone calls, and other reporters get the phone calls from the public affairs officers, from the Marines or the sources or whoever that have the official title but are not calling them in that official capacity to say, like, really great job on that story. Even though, like, their official statement is no comment, like the general says X about you. I think there are educated, not educated, but there are people who are just aware that, like, journalists have a job to do. They understand why we do what we do, and that it's on behalf of the American public. And then there are other people that just think that we are lawless ruffian, that just want to run around and like sometimes we want to cause some problems and ruffle some feathers, right? But like generally it's because we have identified a solution, or sources are telling us about a solution that exists that could improve a situation for somebody, or address a hardship that somebody's experiencing, or address a systemic issue like mental health access that can be very quickly restored if somebody actually takes action. So,
how would you categorize a call you would make to a high-ranking Pentagon official today compared to calling that same type of official 5 years ago when you're just starting out, when War Horse was just starting out? Do you think that you've achieved enough respect or credibility within your journalism field that they can't blow you off as easily, that they have to acknowledge the question and at least try to answer it in some way? Or do you still think they're stonewalling you?
Oh, I still think they're stonewalling me. I definitely think they're still stonewalling me. I have often had to push back about basic policies that they should be following. Like service members have really no reasonable expectation of privacy. Like you have certain, you're being paid with tax dollars, you're doing work on behalf of the American public, like that stuff is releasable. We can ask questions about it. They're supposed to release your name, your rank, your awards, like they call it publicly releasable information. Like there's a dossier that they can give you on every service member. When they really don't like a story that I'm writing about, like they won't even follow, it's either law or policy, I can't remember, but like they don't even follow policy on what information they should be releasing. So it's, sometimes they play game, sometimes they give you an answer just so that you're not saying no, they said no comment or didn't get back to you or whatever, but most of the time I think that most of the time I view what public affairs is doing as an intelligence collection exercise on their part, not that they are actually engaging with me with any good faith whatsoever.
What about the rank and file? Do you think...
I think they love us.
They love it, and do you think they know how to reach you? Do you think they
know how to reach
consider
us.
you an outlet? And is that the ultimate disclosure there, that there's somebody sitting on some base that said, this is an injustice that needs to be known, and I know who I can call?
Yep. I mean, word is spreading about who to call if you need an investigation done the right way. And there have been stories that have not panned. We've gotten plenty of tips that have not panned out and that haven't worked out because the story wasn't there, the source was full of crap. There's all kinds of things that play out.
One of the issues that I thought was really interesting that you take on are some of the more existential issues about the military, war, the really big issues. And you had a great story, and you had a quote called "Next War-itis," where the military seems to focus on the war that's coming and uses that as an excuse not to look back to what they did in the war behind. They can't reflect on lessons learned from that. So, out goes counterinsurgency with Iraq and Afghanistan, in comes great power competition with China. How do you take that on? I mean, are you using academics? Are you using experts? You sit with the some of the think tanks in Washington? Are you relying on them now for information as well?
Yes and no, but like also we are trying to avoid some of the more breaking news stuff. Like War Horse did not care about the Marine Corps' 2030 plan. Like that's what the breaking news organizations are going to cover. That's not what we're going to cover. Like we'll cover it in 5 years when it turns out they haven't accomplished, what they said they're going to do for the 2030. Like that's the type of story that we would go and cover. So I think it's. We try not to get sucked into like the daily news conversations. That way we can focus much on the much bigger, broader topics, more existential topics. I don't think I answered your question.
No, you did. And you were talking before, you were saying you're coming up on close to your 20th anniversary in the military, just like the Vietnam generation. And at that point, you kind of look back and say, what did we do? Why were we doing it? What did we learn about it? Do you think War Horse now is in a position for this latest generation of warriors to really reflect on where they've been the last 20 years?
That's my hope. I started my career profiling World War II veterans when I was at the Daily News in Jacksonville, North Carolina, and it took decades for those people to share their stories with the American public. And along the way, like I talked with Vietnam vets and other generations of veterans and everything, and like it's usually decades right before they're telling that story. And if it's decades before we're telling our stories, then we're not moving the needle like in that time frame. We're only moving the needle once like decades have passed. And I'm trying to figure out a way where like we're not racing. Everybody was racing a few years ago to get all the last World War II veterans' stories before they were all dead. Going back to like being a little bit selfish, like I don't want that for our generation. Like I want our stories to be cataloged. I want our experiences to be cataloged long before we're in a nursing home and having trouble remembering like what we did and what it meant to us and how it made us feel.
Yeah, how veterans feel about it. It's not all muckraking. Some of the stories I enjoy the most are the War Horse. And here's one that I know.
I call it the emotional context for what we do.
Personal reflections on it. Now, here's a title to a story that should warm all of our hearts here in the room. Here's the headline. The day the Marines asked the Army for help, the sun rose in the west and hell iced over. And this is a great story about General Lew Walt, who lost 4 helicopters over in Vietnam, the old H-34, the Sikorsky's, and they couldn't lift them up, and he knew the Army had the helicopters that could do it. But it was some crew chief who was reflecting on that mission where the Army helicopters went to try to bail out or recover these Marine helicopters. But it brought back so many memories, not just the extraction of the helicopter, but the working, the inter-service rivalries and all this stuff. And those are, so I would say, correct me if I'm wrong, probably a third or maybe half of your stories are more about personal reflections than taking on issues.
Yeah, so I think that those personal reflections talk about a lot of those issues, right? Like we've had people write about how sexual violence has impacted them while they were in uniform. We've had Gold Star kids write about what it was like to lose their, parent, whether it was to suicide or combat. We've had almost every we've had since World War II, we've had every generation of veteran write for us up until this point. I can't remember who they were. I read one night, and I couldn't get out of my head for a week. It was about the guys who were running the morgue at I think it was the Da Nang airstrip, that were taking the bodies off the helicopters and dressing them and cleaning out the helicopter. It was, that I hadn't thought about that for so long. It really triggered some very deep memories and emotions. Yeah, we're trying to, there's a lot of stories out there by people just like me, like white Marine infantry guy who shot some people, right? Like the war story. And that's not like the only military experience that's out there. Like just on our team alone, we've got everything from Army band to Marine Corps infantry to Coast Guard. Like it's individual experiences vary. when it comes to the military. And I think that the coverage that we try to do, like, tries to show that breadth of experience that exists in uniform and among military families.
And some of those articles seem to be an attempt at some personal reconciliation with dealing with the hard issues that veterans have had to go through, taking one's lives, being involved in wars. And these people are still very supportive of their military service, but they are still trying to reconcile in their own minds what they went through.
Well, I think part of it, too, is trying to be understood by the people that you served, right? I think that's one of the biggest gifts that War Horse gives, is like if we're trying to bridge the military and civilian divide through storytelling, like these are the stories that are going to accomplish that. Like it's going to take us all sharing our stories because people aren't going to resonate with every single one we publish, but there's going to be one that deeply resonates with people and you know, there's a lot of controversial topics in the military space, but like if you can take a first-person reflection like that, and that's kind of I think that's an easier way for people to approach a story about, you know, anywhere from sexual violence to genocide to whatever, than a hard investigation might be, because it's like somebody taking you into their world, like actually welcoming you into their mind and letting you experience what they went through.
Just as writing was therapeutic for you, how therapeutic do you think it is for some of these people to share these very personal reflections?
The reflections and the writing seminars and like what those stories mean to the individual veterans and military, like my wife can tell you the number of times that I have said I've wanted to quit, I'm giving up, like I can't do this anymore, it's too stressful, fundraising's horrible, whatever. It's generally like the people that have gone through the writing seminars and the people who've written the reflections for us are the people that I most don't want to let down, and why I can't quit. Like those are, I love the journalism, but the reflections and the writing seminars are absolutely my favorite thing that we do, because like I was so privileged to have David Dunlap, like all the Times editors that were my first mentors, all because I sent one email about that letter to Finbar. It's been a blessing to like the caliber of people that I have had in my corner since the beginning. And yes, that's great, but if I can pay that forward to other people and extend that access to other people, then there's more than just me out there now. Like I was joking before, like they gave me a foothold in the room. If you give a Marine a foothold in a room, he's not giving that damn thing. He or she is not giving that damn thing up, right? And now for me, it's about getting that other veteran in the room, getting that other military spouse in the room, like really trying to get a volume of people into a space with people that might not have our experiences. That way they can start to understand us. Because I feel like once people hear like, oh yeah, veterans, military news deserts, like when's the last time I read a story about a veteran? Like, oh crap, like I know a veteran. And like they start to put two and two together and they realize that their favorite sports coach from when they were in 7th grade, or their science teacher from high school, or their youth pastor from, like they start to make the connection of like these are real people that served in the, so.
You have a very important writing seminar coming up next week with veterans who are incarcerated at San Quentin. Tell me what you expect to learn and share with that session.
First off, I expect to challenge all of my preconceived assumptions about what prison and incarcerated people are like. I'm admittedly nervous about going to San Quentin. I'm not going to lie. It also wasn't Randy Howard on our team. I love the idea that she came up with this, but it's going to be 22 incarcerated veterans. They span from Vietnam to present, all generations in between. And we're going to spend 4 days with them inside the prison. We're bringing in award-winning journalists. We're going to help them write their stories, and we'll work with them to publish it after the fact. But with our writing seminars, we always try to identify an underserved segment of the community and help give them the skills and the tools to be able to publish that story. I mean, we've done one for military spouses, we've done one for women vets, we've done one for Gold Star kids, medics and corpsmen. We've got the San Quentin one coming up next week, and then we're doing one for Black veterans this fall.
You know, you might be pleasantly surprised. I mean, San Quentin has a great press and writing tradition, thanks to a lot of folks from UC Berkeley who conduct regular seminars there. And I think you'll be surprised how evocative the experience is being in there with them, that they all want to tell their story. They're not shy. And so it should be a very interesting dynamic. And what do you do? For someone who's never written before, other than a letter to his mother, how do you get them to shape those stories and do that storytelling that you've learned to do?
So all of the credit goes to Dave Christinger. He runs the writing seminars. He teaches all the curriculum. I'm just one of the mentors that help out. But the way that he teaches it and how I've kind of learned to mirror what you start with one true thing. That's it. Just start with one true thing and then go from there. And the advice that I kind of tack onto that after the fact is write it first and then get it right. So like start with one true statement, keep writing, get stuff down on the page, and then you edit it from there because you can't edit what you don't have written down. So it's hard not to delete or erase what you've written when it's crap. But you can polish that. That unpolished mess of words that you've put together can be edited and refined and turned into something really beautiful. But until you get that mess on the page, you can't clean it up.
What's the likelihood we'll see some of those stories on the War Horse? Do you think some of them will be published, the results of this week's training?
Yeah, so our seminars, we do not require that you publish with us after the fact. One of the reasons why is we're a newsroom first, the story might not fit, right? But also, because not every story is a fit for every newspaper. But the overwhelming majority of them do publish. The other reason why we don't have a requirement that they publish with us is they might not be ready. That's a big, a lot of the stories that people have written involve traumatic events or involve deeply personal things that we can't require you to publish. We can't make you put that out into the world. So the lack of a requirement gives us flexibility, but it also gives the writers flexibility to not feel like they have to do something that they don't want to do or aren't ready to do.
From what you know about these prisoners in advance, what is your preconception about how important the military was to their life thus far? Do you think it's still central in their mind, or do you think it's been surpassed by the problems they've had since?
No, I think it's very central. I mean, one of the things that we asked any applicant to do for this seminar and others is we have an application. And they had to fill out an application, explain what they've been through, what they think they might want to write about, kind of what their experiences were. And in each of the narratives that they submitted, in some, the experiences that they had in the military contributed to what they did after they got out of the military. Other people were in the military when they, had the issues, and there were contributing factors there. Other people just the loss of the discipline and the structure and the rigor that they had in the military it wasn't that they had something necessarily traumatic that happened to them and drove them to something, but the void that became a presence in their life led to them doing things that they wouldn't otherwise do. So I think that the experiences that they have within this group are going to be very varied. But I think that all of them are coming into this knowing that they're writing about their military service, and they seem eager. So.
Thank you very much. Let's open up to some questions. Very interesting, and I'm sure everyone else has more questions to ask of Thomas. Any thoughts? Any questions?
Can you please put your phone in the air, or use the QR code for recording this?
Okay.
I have a couple of questions that were sent in.
Okay.
We'll cover
Master Guns?
down on those first. Thank you.
Okay, our first question is, as a fellow prior enlisted Marine, I heard you say, if you want to change the Marine Corps, you need to stay in. How does it feel to know that your reporting has fundamentally changed the experience of the Marines?
Going back to, I mean, having a positive difference on the Marine, I was told when I was a young lad, you make it better than you leave it in a better place than you found it, right? I wanted to do 20 years. I was not going to be a sergeant major of the Marine Corps. Like, I was not a 300 PFT, like, I was an okay-ish Marine. Like, but I wanted to do 20. Like, it was going to be my career. And I felt like I'd learned things in Fallujah and elsewhere that, like, I could pass on to other Marines to help them come home alive. So the fact that I can have a positive influence on the Marine Corps, no longer being in uniform, like, that means the world to me, because, like, going back to the like that mental health story that I wrote about in North Carolina, like, I saved lives there, like, and I re-enlisted in the Marine Corps to go to Afghanistan and all that, because, like, I felt like what I'd learned while I was in uniform and in Fallujah, like, I could pass that on and help save more lives and bring people home later down the line. So I feel like, yeah, it's a continuation of what I did, so, like, it makes me incredibly proud. I often say to people, like, the biggest misconception about me and the work that I do, and it legitimately hurts, like, people assume that I hate the Marine Corps. People assume that I have this giant axe to grind, and that I just want to burn the institution down. Like, that is so far from the truth. Like, what I want to do is help to make the organization better, help to make sure that we are the most lethal fighting force on the world that can do the job that we need to do. Like, because I've kicked in the doors. And, like, a lot of people I'm the enlisted guy that writes a lot about officer misconduct, and people criticize me for that. But the reality is like, men and women like me who are on the front line put their trust in Marine officers, and we need to be able to trust you. And if I can do something that helps to make sure, like, that trust and, like, is there for the people heading down range, like, that I love, like, knowing that I can help still.
Well, to validate what he's saying there, Thomas was the first enlisted man to receive the General Lejeune Award for Leadership. And I don't think they would have given it to someone who was hell-bent on destroying the Marine Corps. So, in a way...
I'm going to hand back the spoon.
So, there is a way you can take on an institution at the same time that you're trying to improve an institution.
Yes, yes. It's all about improving it in my eyes. The reporting that I do is very much solutions driven. Like, the reporting that the War Horse does is very much solutions driven. Like, none of it is personal. It is like, we have a job to do as journalists. We do it on behalf of the American taxpayer, and Marines work for the taxpayers. So it's a job, and I love it, and I see it as a continuation of my service.
Thank you.
He'll get you a microphone here. One second, he'll get you a microphone here.
You briefly mentioned the challenges that your organization is facing. Would you please speak to what are some of those challenges that War Horse is facing?
So it's no secret that... Test. I would say that the biggest challenge that really any newsroom is facing nowadays is sustainability. The news model has been broken in recent years, partly our own doing. Like, there are many problems in the media ecosystem, but I would say, fundraising is hands down the biggest issue that War Horse and any other newsroom faces. Trustworthy reporting that is fact-checked, trustworthy reporting is an expensive thing to produce. Videography is like way more expensive than print, but like doing print journalism the right way with the safeguards in place that make sure it can be trusted, and it's not cheap. So it's, I would say that's the biggest thing. The other thing that I say is the other two challenges are the military and civilian divide. People just don't understand the military, the issues that we face. So I coin that the empathy gap because people just don't know what they don't know. And then I would say that media illiteracy is the third of the biggest challenges that we face. People don't understand what journalists do. They don't understand the role of the fourth estate. They don't understand like how it all fits into our daily lives. And therefore, I think less people, maybe it's not that they don't, might be incorrect to say they don't care about it, but I think they're less aware of the need for it in their life than they should be. That answer your question?
Well, along those lines, do you have branding with your media?
So we've been around for 8 years now. So I mean, we educate the public on the human impact of military service. I mean, like that's our textbook mission. And yeah, but we do a lot of branding.
And the perception within our industry is one of the rare independent sources of military reporting. And they've proven to, like I said, they've spent a lot of time and effort on investigations. I'd almost argue, Thomas, with the decline of media in general, it may even open up some more opportunities for you because we even have less time to do the type of reporting we like to do, and hopefully they'll rely more on your organization for doing the heavy lifting.
I hope you're right. I mean, I think that, nonprofit news is the fastest growing sector of news right now. In a kind of cynical way, I think that some of the restructuring that's happened in news is in response to like what we've done to ourselves in the ecosystem. I think a lot of the damage has been done by like TV. I think that's a cesspool that needs to be reevaluated and thought about. Like not news, I'm talking about like the non-news hour stuff.
Yeah, you look at the rise of something like Politico. When you look at the last elections, the major news was broken not by the major news networks, not by the major newspapers.
Yeah.
It's by more smaller, leaner groups that are out there every day really digging hard for the information.
Yeah.
And so hopefully I think that you might get a little bit of that tailwind as well.
I hope so. I mean, I think people are seeing that you can trust I mean, it's why you guys have had so much trust for so long. You're part nonprofit, like you're transparent about who you get your money from. Like every segment starts with, this brought to you by so-and-so. Like, and when you hide information from people and when you aren't transparent about where your money's coming from and how you're paying for your journalism, or, who your sponsors are for a certain event, like all of those behaviors just chip away at the trust that people have for your newsroom. And the goal is to try and be as transparent as possible with how we do our work, why we do our work, how we fund our work, so that way hopefully like people will continue to trust us, and then the brand continues to grow and awareness continues to grow, and then we're the size of a Politico, and like it's fun for me to imagine what our impact can look like at scale, because right now like we've changed a few laws, like we've won a bunch of journalism awards, like, but the reality is like the War Horse is 8 people. Like we're not a huge team. Like we are small but mighty. So like and we have support staff and 1099 and like some other part-timers that help, but like we're a core staff of 8 people. And we're having the impact that we're having with half a squad, right? Like, imagine what we're going to do when we have a platoon, when we're the size of a company. Like I think it's going to be monumental.
Thomas Brennan. Oh, General Mike, go ahead.
I want to congratulate you for receiving the John A. Lejeune Leadership Award. It's never happened before, but it shows that the Marine Corps realizes that you bring value. And I thank you for that. And you're going out to San Quentin next week to teach 22 veterans how to write. I think that's what it is. But I want to tell you, my wife and I were on the Governor's Council for the conversion or the changing San Quentin from a prison to a rehabilitation center. We did that, we participated in it, because we've been working with inmates for over 6 or 7 years, along with Robert Rosenthal. He's the former editor of the Philadelphia Inquirer and the San Francisco Chronicle. And he's a founder or he's an executive director, I guess, or CEO now, of the Center for Investigative Reporting. And he appreciates what you do. But I tell you, Thomas, don't ever lose that enthusiasm that you have, because you are making a difference.
Thank you, that means a lot, sir.
Thomas, I just want to say thank you for appearing tonight.
We hope you enjoyed this presentation by the Marines Memorial Association and Foundation. To become a member, donate, or learn more about our upcoming events, our programs, and our organization, please go to the Marines Memorial website at www.mmaf1946.org. Thank you for your support.